So the Guardians of the Galaxy game came out earlier this week, and now that I've had time to consolidate my thoughts, let's, in the words of Rocket Raccoon, flark and review this Kratakan game. Okay, so from the top, I do want to just say that I absolutely, thoroughly, absolutely, amazingly, absolutely, everythingly loved and enjoyed Guardians as a game. And I think that it is perhaps one of my favorite games in the past however long. I am totally taken away with this game. It hits all of the right spots. And I think it is a perfect example of what a single-player RPG should be like. I think that's very much true of the characters, of the gameplay, of the story. All of that was perfectly well done. So I will kind of go through these, and I'll try not to be spoilerific as much as I can. In certain places there might be kind of a hint of a spoiler just to kind of elaborate a point, so you know, don't be too worried, but take it with a grain of salt that there might be some references throughout this video. First of all, I think the story pacing was really well done. The flashbacks were very reminiscent of the pacing in Fallen Order. Actually, I felt that when I was going through this game, I had a lot of kind of reminiscent moments of when I was playing through that campaign. I think there was a lot of kind of the same themes as well in this story. And that was really fun. It felt Star Warsy. It also felt Mass Effect-y, but it also felt like just a normal, typical, enjoyable RPG. Like, not too deviant, and I liked that. I think sometimes games, especially in the kind of more modern era, try to reinvent the wheel and oftentimes fail because of that. I think because Guardians kind of knuckled down the stuff that everyone has loved for the past however long, they succeeded. There were things that were different, obviously. The Guardians themselves as characters are so unique that kind of drives a lot of the story anyway. The story itself taking a lot of elements from, you know, the MCU, for example, but also comics, but rejigging those and reworking those to make something that's really unique. For example, the starting point of the story is 12 years after this war that happens, and you're encountering this world that has already been devastated by Thanos, for example. And that's kind of the setting for the story. Now, that could be a game unto itself. That could have been this game going through a war against Thanos. But we've seen that before, and I'm really happy that they said, you know what, we'll reference Thanos, we'll use Thanos, we kind of have to because Gamora and Drax are part of this team, but we're not going to use him in any big way. He might be there in the future if we do a sequel or something like that, but otherwise we're going to leave it alone. I loved that. I thought that was a really good way of just acknowledging everything that everyone knows about this universe, you know, Thanos, the Chitauri, Nebula, etc. and so on, but without going overboard on it. Also, the use of kind of small pieces of storytelling, you know, stuff like closing the fridge door, which was kind of a running gag, or the fact that earlier in the game Drax would suggest throwing Rocket, and later on Rocket suggests throwing him himself, and Drax says, no, I'm not going to do that. You're part of the team. You're a valued member. And just that kind of storytelling aspect that was built upon, but in small ways, in really small referential ways that if you pay attention, you'll get it. If you don't, you'll miss it. And I love that. I also think the visual of the game was amazing. Everything you see throughout the game is just stunning. The color palette is immense. Star-Lord's design, brilliant. Gamora's design, brilliant. Drax, I really like this version of Drax versus the MCU version. I think this Drax is a lot more in-depth, not just looks-wise, but also character-wise. Groot is, you know, Groot. I mean, there's not much difference there. There's not much variation, and similar with Rocket. But I do like the way they've took these characters. I do like the way they've developed these characters. And the supporting cast as well, you know, having Cosmo and Mantis and other characters show up was really, really fun and really, really intriguing. The fact that we also had hints of other characters, Moondragon, for example, Ronan, which really does hint at the fact that we will get a sequel. I think this is set up really well to provide maybe 4 games, 5 games, if they do it right, if they play it right, if they use the right characters at the right time. I think that this could be a really big franchise, a big kind of titan of gaming for the next however 5, 6, 7, whatever years, if they do it right. Building on that, the gameplay, using and utilizing the team all the time, that's like the mechanic of the game. That's the main crux of this game. You're using Groot to tangle enemies down so that Gamora can slice them up. You're hitting with Drax and knocking them down so that then Rocket can blow them to smithereens. Like, you have these interactions between the characters and then your abilities yourself, which are just so rich and interesting, but at the same time so easy to understand and so straightforward. And that's the same for the puzzles as well. The fact that you can use Drax to lift things and Gamora to cut things down, and Rocket is the tech guy as always, and, you know, Groot builds bridges and gets you over certain hard to traverse areas. I just think that was really well done as well, that you're always using these characters to the fullest, even though you're not playing as them, which I think a lot of people had an issue with before this game came out. And don't get me wrong, would I have liked to play as Gamora? Yes. Would I have liked to play as Rocket? Yes, of course I would have. But I think this story necessitated Star-Lord being center for the whole thing, and it really actually worked in the end. Speaking of that, the fact that they used Star-Lord in a different way to the MCU, and again, kind of more in line with the comics, but still aside from that, was good as well. You know, his mother having a different kind of story herself, but also him in terms of having the elemental guns that he doesn't have in the MCU, that this elemental gun was so integral to moving not just the story forward, but also the gameplay, you know, using them to freeze things or electrify things, pull things to you, etc. and so on. On top of that, I think this game had a lot of surprises. Nowhere comes to mind when you think about the Collector's Museum, as well as the Maklu 4 level. I think that was really interesting. There was a lot of fun to be had there. I think this is just a really good composite of like the best of Marvel and the best of single player gaming. And I feel like this game really does set up the potential for a Marvel gaming universe if they want to go down that path. It might not be a good idea for them depending on how they want to approach other characters. They might want to have them separate. That's fine too. But Marvel is really starting to amp up their games of late. For example, Skydance New Media is now developing a Marvel game. I think this is a perfect time to kind of look at making these games that kind of tell or kind of enact this overarching, interesting, you know, story as well. I don't think it necessarily needs to be the same as the MCU. I don't think it needs to build to this big game where you fight this big villain, but it would just be nice to kind of have these games inhabit some kind of similar universe or some kind of capability to have some kind of crossover, especially with something like Avengers. That would have been something that would have been really interesting to have Guardians and Avengers share a universe and potentially seeing those crossover at some point, and that could have been like a potential sequel to Guardians down the line that they show up in the Avengers game. But I understand why that might not be the case, and I understand that a lot of people don't like Avengers but do like Guardians, so that could be a hard sell. In terms of the bad, so to speak, of this game, I didn't really encounter that much. There were a few clipped cutscenes where it felt like, especially with companions, that you were starting them and they kind of just jumped out of nowhere. They were just there. That was kind of off-putting in places. Otherwise, I only encountered really 2 bugs, and they were both in the last chapter of the game, funnily enough. One was a visual bug, which was nothing to be concerned about. It was essentially that Star-Lord's arms got stuck behind his head in the animation, and they wouldn't reset, which is nothing, not really. And then the other one was the audio went just as the credits were rolling and into some of the scenes that happened after that, which was obviously a little bit annoying, frustrating, but that's the only thing I can really complain about in this game. There was a few loose ends in the story, but again, with the fact that this story is likely to continue, you know, characters that you've seen in this game are probably going to end up turning up in other ones, especially if you made the right choices and you've done the right things. And I can't wait to see if that's the case. I can't wait to see a Guardians of the Galaxy game too. And on top of that, what other games Marvel are going to bring out next? I think Marvel are onto a good thing with Guardians, and I hope that they see that and use it as a template going forward for other games of this sort. But time will tell with that one. As always, guys, thank you for watching. If you do like this video, please share, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.